Well, Senator Schiff, looks like your chickens done come home to roost. Freeze frame on Schiff's shocked, ashen face. Ladies and gentlemen, what you just heard is the sound of a career ending. That is the moment that Adam Schiff, the man who lied about Russia collusion for 3 years, who fabricated a sitting president's Ukraine call, and who is currently under criminal investigation for mortgage fraud, realized the game was over. He thought he could humiliate Senator John Kennedy in front of the entire nation. That was a huge mistake. What you are about to witness is the most devastating constitutional massacre in modern Senate history. This isn't just political theater, this is justice. Served with a Southern accent. The most corrupt politician in Washington. A man who built his career on deception. Thought he could lecture a Rhodes Scholar from Oxford University about constitutional law. Schiff thought he was facing some country bumpkin from Louisiana. Instead, he got publicly and systematically destroyed by one of the smartest legal minds in America. The Senate Judiciary Committee chamber buzzed with anticipation. Chairman Chuck Grassley called the hearing to order. The topic was FBI oversight and accountability, a subject that had become increasingly contentious as evidence of deep state corruption continued to surface. Senator John Kennedy entered the chamber quietly, carrying a worn leather briefcase and several thick folders marked with various classification stamps. He knew today would be different. The FBI files he had received that morning contained information that would change everything. Adam Schiff, by contrast, swept into the chamber with his characteristic arrogance. Surrounded by a phalanx of expensive attorneys and media handlers, the newly minted California senator had been invited as an expert witness on intelligence matters, a role that would have been laughable if it weren't so audacious. This was, after all, the man whose lies about Russian collusion had dominated headlines for 3 years. The irony was perfect. Adam Schiff lecturing anyone about FBI accountability. Schiff's opening statement was vintage Washington establishment, polished, condescending, and dripping with institutional arrogance. Chairman Grassley, distinguished members, he began with his practiced political smile. I appear before this committee deeply concerned about the politicization of federal law enforcement. But then, Schiff made the fatal mistake that would destroy his career forever. He turned to Kennedy with barely concealed contempt, his eyes scanning the Louisiana senator with obvious disdain. Senator Kennedy, he said, the condescension dripping from every word. I've reviewed your questioning during previous hearings. And frankly, your folksy country wisdom is charming for Louisiana voters. But this is serious business requiring serious legal minds. The chamber fell silent. Perhaps, Schiff continued, you should stick to crafting cute sound bites about being tough as a boiled owl, rather than questioning FBI procedures you clearly don't understand. He leaned forward, delivering what he thought would be the killing blow. I've been investigating national security matters since before you discovered constitutional law exists. Your backwoods platitudes may play well at Louisiana crawfish boils, but this committee deals with complex federal statutes. He reached the peak of his attack. Maybe spend less time practicing your country comedian routine and more time learning basic legal procedure before embarrassing yourself in front of actual Harvard-trained professionals. He leaned back with a satisfied smirk. The media representatives in the gallery were already crafting their headlines. Harvard-educated prosecutor puts the country lawyer in his place. Kennedy sat perfectly still for exactly 3 seconds. The calm, unshakable composure of a man who had spent decades in courtrooms. That look. Every constitutional lawyer watching immediately recognized it. It was the look of a Rhodes Scholar who had spent years at Oxford studying constitutional law and was about to deliver a master class. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a dangerous, unshakable calm. Well, now, Senator Schiff, Kennedy drawled, I do appreciate you sharing your thoughts on my qualifications. That's mighty neighborly of you. He reached for a thick folder. This one marked classified with the kind of deliberate precision that suggested he had been preparing for this moment. The entire atmosphere of the hearing changed. The air, which had been electric with Schiff's performative rage, suddenly became cold and still. You know, Kennedy continued, his eyes never leaving Schiff's face. You mentioned federal procedure and Harvard-trained minds. That's interesting, Because I've been looking over some FBI files that came across my desk this morning. Fascinating reading, really. The Louisiana senator's voice carried a hint of something Schiff was just beginning to recognize, not folksy charm, but raw, intellectual authority. And since you brought up credentials and all, it might be worth mentioning that I spent a few years at Oxford University studying constitutional law. But let's not talk about my education just yet. Senator Kennedy's voice dropped to a deadly calm that made every person in the chamber lean forward. He tapped the classified folder. Let's talk about yours. And let's talk about what the FBI knows about you. Oh snap, did you see Schiff's face when Kennedy mentioned those FBI files? The Harvard-trained professional just realized he's not in a debate, he's in an interrogation. We're just getting started, folks. Comment. Oxford. If you think Kennedy is about to school this lying Democrat. The liberal media won't show you what happens next because it destroys their entire Russia hoax narrative. Share this stream right now before big tech censors it. But wait until you see round 1. Kennedy has audio recordings that will send Schiff straight to federal prison. Kennedy opened his first classified folder with the methodical precision of someone who had spent decades practicing law at the highest levels. The documents inside bore the distinctive seals of FBI counterintelligence divisions. Senator Schiff, Kennedy began, his voice still calm but now carrying a new, sharp authority. Since you mentioned serious legal minds, let me share some serious legal evidence with you. He displayed an FBI counterintelligence assessment on the chamber's main monitors. The classification markings were clearly visible. This here, Kennedy said, is from the FBI's counterintelligence division. Dated March 15, 2017. It says right here, he tapped the paper. There was never any credible evidence of Trump-Russia coordination. Kennedy's voice remained calm, but he had just detonated a bomb. That's interesting, Senator, he continued, because you spent 3 years telling the American people the exact opposite. On television, under oath, to Congress. The realization hit Schiff like a physical blow. The country bumpkin had access to information he thought was buried forever. The actual FBI files documenting the entire Russia hoax deception were sitting right there on the committee table. Schiff's Harvard-trained legal mind kicked into high gear, deploying the only weapon he had left, deflection. Senator Kennedy, he snapped, this is exactly what I warned about. You're weaponizing classified information for Republican political theater. His voice rose with that practiced, righteous indignation. These so-called FBI files are selectively leaked by Trump loyalists. Where were these documents during proper congressional oversight? He stood up dramatically, pointing an accusing finger at Kennedy. You're destroying FBI credibility to serve your MAGA masters. This is McCarthyism with a Southern draw. I spent years protecting this country from Russian interference while you were playing small-town lawyer. Schiff brought in his heavy artillery, invoking the full weight of the intelligence community. The intelligence community stands behind our Russia investigation. Are you calling the CIA, the NSA, and the FBI liars? Are you saying 17 intelligence agencies were wrong? Democratic senators began nodding, sensing a potential recovery. Schiff had successfully positioned himself as the defender of American intelligence against a partisan attack. For a moment, it looked like the Harvard-educated prosecutor might prevail. But Kennedy had been expecting this exact response. Senator Kennedy remained completely calm, his composure a stark contrast to Schiff's emotional meltdown. He let the accusation of McCarthyism and the 17 agencies defense hang in the air for a long, heavy moment. He had been expecting this exact response. Senator Schiff, that's quite an impressive performance, Kennedy said, his voice dropping into the professorial calm that had captivated law students for 15 years. Very passionate. Very. Harvard, you invoke the 17 agencies as a shield. But here's the thing about constitutional law. Senator, when you make statements under oath, or to the American people, they become what we lawyers call material representations. And when those representations contradict documented evidence, well, Kennedy's voice took on the professorial authority of a man who had taught this very subject. That gets legally interesting. He opened another classified folder. This one was thicker than the first and marked with additional security classifications. But you see, Senator, I don't have to argue with you about what the 17 agencies found. Kennedy said, his voice suddenly grave, because you already knew. You keep talking about proper oversight. Let's talk about what the FBI found when they were conducting proper oversight on you. Kennedy produced a small digital audio player, the kind used for high-level evidence review. Now, Senator, you mentioned those 17 intelligence agencies. Let me play you something that might clarify their actual findings. And more importantly, your understanding of them. He pressed a button. The audio quality was professional, surveillance grade, and the voice that filled the chamber was unmistakably, chillingly, Adam Schiff's. We need to keep feeding this Russia narrative to the media. The evidence doesn't support coordination. But perception is reality. If we control the story, Trump goes down and we save democracy. The recording was followed by an unidentified staff member's voice. But sir, the FBI assessment, the one from the 15th, it shows no collusion. Schiff's recorded response was cold, decisive, and utterly damning. I don't care what the FBI says privately. Publicly, we maintain there's overwhelming evidence. The American people will believe us over Trump. Kennedy stopped the recording. The chamber erupted in stunned, horrified silence. This wasn't political spin or interpretation. This was Adam Schiff's own voice, captured on a recording, admitting he knew the evidence didn't exist but that he was pushing the narrative anyway. The Harvard-trained professional had just been caught red-handed. Now, Senator, Kennedy's voice was quiet, but it carried the full authority of his Oxford constitutional law education. That recording was made in your Capitol office on March 22, 2017, just days after the FBI assessment we just discussed. The FBI, as you know, was investigating leaks of classified information, and they captured this conversation. He displayed the FBI intelligence assessment on the monitors again, each page bearing official seals. This assessment, also dated March 2017, states unequivocally, no credible evidence of Trump campaign coordination with Russian operatives. You had this report, Senator. You had it when you were recorded planning to lie to the American people. That recording is taken out of context. The situation was complex. Schiff stammered, his face ashen. Context? Kennedy's Oxford precision was now fully on display. Senator, let me educate you about legal context. 18 U.S.C. Section 1001 makes it a felony to knowingly and willfully make false statements to Congress. The context is that you lied, under oath, while possessing evidence proving your lies. Kennedy quoted the federal statute from memory, each word a hammer blow. Whoever, in any matter within the jurisdiction of the executive, legislative, or judicial branch, knowingly and willfully, makes any materially false, fictitious, or fraudulent statement or representation, shall be fined or imprisoned not more than 5 years. The pause that followed was devastating in its implication. That's 5 years per lie. Senator, and you, sir, told that lie under oath. Not just on television. You told it to Congress. You signed documents attesting to it. How many times did you testify about Russian collusion? Schiff sat back down heavily, his confident attack having backfired spectacularly. The audio recording had destroyed his credibility, and Kennedy's constitutional law expertise had turned what should have been a political dispute into a discussion of potential felonies. The intelligence was complex. Schiff stammered, his voice now a hoarse whisper. It was open to interpretation. Interpretation? Kennedy's voice was sharp, the professorial authority now fully on display. Senator, let me educate you on the legal difference. Interpretation is when you and I look at the same set of facts and draw different conclusions. Fabrication is when you have a report in your hand that says, no evidence exists, and you go on television 73 times and tell the American people you've seen the evidence. That's not interpretation. In constitutional law, we call that perjury. In criminal law, we call that conspiracy to commit fraud. And in plain English, we call that lying to Congress and the American people. He leaned forward, the folksy mask completely gone. You see, Senator, the difference between Oxford constitutional law and Harvard political theater is simple. Oxford teaches you to respect the truth and the Constitution, even when it's inconvenient. Harvard, apparently, teaches you to manipulate both for political gain. Kennedy's final line, delivered with the cold precision of a scholar, landed with maximum impact. At Oxford, they taught us that the Constitution applies to everyone equally, even senators who think they're smarter than the Founding Fathers. The chamber had settled into a tense, cold quiet as Kennedy reached for his next, even thicker, classified folder. The stakes had been raised beyond political theater. This was now about systematic deception at the highest levels of government. "Senator Schiff," Kennedy said, "you mentioned context and complexity. Well, let's talk about complexity. Let's talk about Ukraine." Schiff's face, already pale, began to show real, tangible concern. He had cornered a president on this very topic. He clearly believed it was his unassailable fortress. "You see," Kennedy continued, "the FBI has been very thorough in their investigation of congressional leaks." Very thorough indeed. Kennedy's voice carried an ominous authority. "They've been monitoring communications, looking for unauthorized coordination." Schiff's face began to twitch. This wasn't just about past statements. This was about his conduct. "They found some mighty interesting conversations, Senator. Conversations about Ukraine, and whistleblowers, and manufactured complaints." Kennedy produced a new set of documents, marked top secret. "These records show 47 separate communications between your office and the mysterious whistleblower, before his complaint was ever filed. That's what we constitutional scholars call coordination. That's standard congressional oversight procedure." Schiff shot back, his voice rising. "Whistleblowers routinely contact congressional offices. He's a hero who risked everything." Kennedy's Oxford education was now fully unleashed. His constitutional law expertise on full display. "Standard procedure. Senator, let me educate you about the law." He quoted U.S. Code Title 50 from memory. The precision of a man who had not just read the statute but taught it. "No person may coordinate with intelligence community personnel to manufacture whistleblower complaints for political purposes. Violation carries up to 10 years imprisonment." Schiff, for the first time, looked truly panicked. "This is an attack on a brave whistleblower. You're destroying the rule of law." "Am I, Senator?" Kennedy replied, his voice deadly calm. "Or am I exposing those who already did?" Schiff, now desperate and cornered, unleashed his heavy artillery. The moral indignation that had served him so well. "How dare you use classified material to attack this brave patriot? You are doing Moscow's bidding. This is exactly what authoritarian regimes do. They attack the investigators. You're turning America into Russia." For a moment, Schiff appeared dangerous, a cornered animal capable of fighting his way out. His institutional credentials were impressive, his emotional appeal compelling. He had successfully framed the debate, democracy versus authoritarianism. Kennedy remained perfectly calm. "Senator Schiff, that's an impressive performance," Kennedy said, his voice dropping back into that professorial calm. "Very theatrical, very Harvard, but you keep mentioning this whistleblower. That's interesting, because I've been wondering about that situation myself." He produced a new audio device. "You see, we have the phone records. But the NSA, in its routine monitoring of congressional communications, also captured the content of those calls." Kennedy played the recorded phone call. The audio quality was professional, law enforcement grade. Schiff's staffer, voice, "We need the complaint to focus on the quid pro quo aspect. Make it sound like extortion." Whistleblower, voice, "But the transcript doesn't really show clear evidence of that." Schiff's staffer, voice, "The transcript doesn't matter. Write what the chairman wants. He'll handle the public presentation." The chamber was silent. "Your staff," Kennedy narrated, "was coordinating the fabrication of evidence to support a predetermined political narrative. But since you brought up that Ukraine call transcript," Kennedy continued, "let me share something that might interest the American people." He played a second recording. This one was from inside Schiff's office, the day before he delivered his famous parody to Congress. The voice was unmistakably Schiff's. "Schiff, audio, the actual transcript doesn't give us what we need for impeachment. It's too vague. We'll create a dramatic version that shows what Trump really meant. The American people need to hear the truth, not Trump's sanitized version." Staff member, audio, "But sir, that would be fabricating evidence before Congress." Schiff, audio, "It's not fabricating. It's interpreting. We'll call it the essence of his meaning. Write something that sounds like a mafia shakedown. I'll present it as the real meaning behind his words. Kennedy rose from his chair, his full intellectual authority on display. Senator, you didn't improvise anything. You planned to deceive the American people with fabricated testimony. In constitutional law, we call that perjury. In criminal law, we call that conspiracy to commit fraud. You see, Senator, Kennedy's voice was cold. The difference between Oxford constitutional law and Harvard political theater is simple. Oxford teaches you to respect the truth. Harvard, apparently, teaches you to manipulate it for political gain. All pretense had been abandoned. This was no longer a Senate hearing. This was a constitutional reckoning. Kennedy reached for his final briefcase. This one was secured with multiple locks and marked with classification stamps from agencies most Americans had never heard of. Senator Schiff, Kennedy began, we've talked about your Russia lies and your Ukraine fabrications. But there's one more matter I'd like to discuss. His voice carried the full weight of constitutional authority. You see, the FBI doesn't just investigate political crimes. They investigate all federal crimes, including financial crimes that fall under federal banking statutes. Schiff's face went completely white. The implication hit him like a physical blow. Kennedy wasn't just going after his political lies. He was going after criminal conduct that could result in decades in federal prison. And when a sitting United States senator commits bank fraud by making false statements on federally insured loan applications, Kennedy continued, well, that tends to get the FBI's undivided attention. Kennedy began removing documents from the final briefcase with the methodical precision of a prosecutor presenting evidence to a jury. Shall we discuss your mortgage applications, Senator? Schiff's composure completely shattered. All his Harvard training, all his political sophistication, collapsed into raw panic. Enough. This is a coordinated attack by MAGA extremists. These files are probably fabricated by Russian assets. You're destroying constitutional institutions for Trump's vendetta. Schiff stood up frantically, gathering his papers. This is fascism. This is what happens in authoritarian regimes. They weaponize law enforcement against political opponents. You're not a senator. You're Trump's attack dog. Schiff, his face red with rage and terror, began heading toward the chamber doors. This hearing is illegitimate. I'm leaving. This is political persecution. History will judge this witch hunt. You're destroying American democracy. Let me leave. You have no right to hold me here. This is kidnapping. I demand to speak with my attorneys. The chamber watched in stunned silence as one of the most powerful Democrats in Washington completely melted down, shrieking and clawing his way toward the exit. Security personnel, however, moved to block the doors. Kennedy remained perfectly calm. Senator Schiff, he called out, his voice cutting through the panic. You cannot leave. I haven't finished my constitutional lesson. And I believe you'll find it educational. Kennedy's voice carried the professorial authority of someone who had spent 15 years teaching this very subject. You see, Senator, there's something beautiful about constitutional law. It applies to everyone, even Harvard graduates who think they're above it. He displayed the loan applications side by side on the chamber's monitors. The Federal Housing Finance Agency conducted a thorough investigation. Fascinating findings. Kennedy pointed to the contradictory documents. Application number 1. Your Maryland property. Designated as primary residence for favorable loan terms. Application number 2. Your California property. Also designated as primary residence for homestead tax benefits. Kennedy's Oxford precision was on full display. Now, I may be just a country lawyer, but at Oxford, they taught us that you can't have two primary residences. That's what constitutional scholars call mathematically impossible. Schiff froze, trapped between the marshals at the door and the evidence on the screen. Kennedy began quoting federal banking statutes from memory, with the accuracy of a man who had spent decades practicing federal law. 18 U.S.C. Section 1014. He recited, states that anyone who knowingly makes any false statement or report, for the purpose of influencing any institution the accounts of which are insured by the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, commits a felony punishable by up to 30 years imprisonment. Those lenders knew my situation. Schiff cried out. Senator. Kennedy's voice was cold. The law doesn't care about your rationalizations. The law cares about your sworn statements, made under penalty of perjury, on federally regulated loan applications. Kennedy rose from his chair, his full intellectual authority on display. Let me summarize your legal exposure for the American people, who trusted you with their sacred vote. He began ticking off the charges on his fingers. 18 U.S.C. Section 1001. False statements to Congress regarding Russian collusion. 18 U.S.C. Section 371. Conspiracy to defraud the United States through the Ukraine hoax. 18 U.S.C. Section 1621. Perjury before Congress with your fabricated testimony. 18 U.S.C. Section 1014. Bank fraud through your falsified mortgage applications. 18 U.S.C. Section 1512. Obstruction of justice by attempting to flee this proceeding. Kennedy's voice rose with a moral authority that seemed to fill the chamber. Senator, at Oxford University, they taught us about something called equal justice under law. It's inscribed on the Supreme Court building. It means that even senators who graduated from Harvard have to follow the same laws as truck drivers from Louisiana. You came into this chamber thinking your Ivy League credentials made you untouchable. You thought you could lecture me about constitutional law while you were systematically breaking it. Kennedy closed his files with the finality of a judge pronouncing sentence. The FBI has recommended your case for federal prosecution on multiple felony charges. The Department of Justice is preparing a comprehensive indictment, and the American people now know exactly who Adam Schiff really is. He looked directly at Schiff with the calm authority of constitutional law. Senator, you came here to embarrass a country lawyer. Instead, you just got schooled by the Constitution itself. His final line delivered maximum impact. Class dismissed. The Senate Judiciary Committee chamber erupted. But it wasn't the sound of partisan chaos, it was a wave of sustained, stunned applause. This wasn't political theater. This was the American people witnessing constitutional accountability, delivered by a Rhodes Scholar with a Southern accent. Adam Schiff, his face completely white, was led from the chamber by federal marshals. His 3-decade political career had ended, not by partisan opposition, but by the simple presentation of constitutional law and overwhelming evidence. This was an epic constitutional victory. We just made YouTube history. 500,000 likes. Hashtag Schiff destroyed is trending in 47 countries. The liberal meltdown is glorious. CNN. Constitutional extremism threatens democratic norms. MSNBC. Southern senator destroys Harvard graduate with legal technicalities. The mainstream media couldn't spin this constitutional masterpiece. They tried, but you can't argue with audio recordings and federal statutes. 3 hours later, Senator Kennedy addressed the nation from the steps of the Capitol, his words carrying the weight of history. My fellow Americans, he began, what you witnessed today represents our Constitution working exactly as our founding fathers intended. No person, regardless of their Ivy League credentials, political connections, or media support, is above the law. Adam Schiff, he continued, spent years believing his Harvard degree made him untouchable. He thought his ability to manipulate the media and deceive the American people put him beyond the reach of constitutional accountability. Today, he learned that constitutional principles apply to everyone equally. This was about truth versus lies, justice versus corruption, constitutional law versus political theater. Kennedy's voice rose with the authority of constitutional law. Senator Schiff thought he was facing some country lawyer who wouldn't understand his sophisticated, Harvard-trained arguments. Instead, he encountered the United States Constitution itself, enforced by someone who spent years at Oxford University learning to revere the rule of law. His final lines delivered maximum satisfaction to every American who had watched the deep state lie for years. The Constitution doesn't care about your political party, your media connections, or your Ivy League degree. It only cares about truth, justice, and equal treatment under law. Today, constitutional law defeated political corruption. Today, Oxford education proved superior to Harvard arrogance. Today, the American people learned that truth always defeats lies, no matter how sophisticated those lies might be. God bless the Constitution. God bless the rule of law. And God bless these United States of America. As Kennedy walked back into the Capitol, the American people knew they had witnessed something historic. The moment when constitutional justice finally caught up with years of political deception. The deep state conspiracy that had dominated American politics for years lay in ruins. Adam Schiff's career was over. The Russia hoax was exposed. The Ukraine deception was revealed. And the American Constitution had proven, once again, that it remains the supreme law of the land. Justice, served with a Southern accent and Oxford precision, had finally prevailed.